4 to 6.
We'll see. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call together the board meeting of the McLeod County Board of Commissioners today on April 2nd. Can we please stand for our Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Move into our consideration of agenda items. We do have two quick changes to place in our agenda. We will be on item 6, we will be removing items B and C. Those are the only two changes that I have so far. Are there any other additions or corrections to today's agenda?
No other changes, Mr. Chair?
Move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Nagel, a second by Kruger to approve the agenda items with the changes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will proceed to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to the consent agenda. Any questions on our consent agenda today?
Move to approve. Second.
We have a motion by Nagel, a second by Luthens to approve today's consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will proceed to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item up will be environmental services. Bartolewski, Director.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
One item for your consideration this morning is to consider authorizing a third-party consultant review of a submitted voluntary discretionary environmental assessment worksheet EAW for conditional use per JP 24-C1. That was a requested feedlot expansion located at 18503 Nickel Avenue, Hutchinson, Section 3, Hassan Valley Township by Garrett Luthens, Luthens Family LLC, Skyview Dairy Incorporated. The request for the CUP was an increase in animal units from 2,540 to 3,520 animal units. So with that being said, anything over 399 animal units upon expansion in the Hutchinson Joint Planning Ordinance requires a conditional use permit. With that being said, the Hutchinson Joint Planning Committee heard this request to increase animal units at their March 20th, 2024 regular meeting. A motion was made to table until the June 20th, 2024 meeting with the recommendation that the McLeod County Board of Commissioners require a third-party consultant review of the submitted voluntary discretionary environmental assessment worksheet EAW that has been completed by Skyview Dairy. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, MPCA, issued the operating permit increase of animal units and facility expansion on April 25th, 2023, prior to the applicant's application for a conditional use permit. Therefore, the MPCA cannot be the reviewer of the EAW. With that being said, and this is a discretionary EAW, it's not mandatory. This review has gone through the McLeod County Feedlot Committee. Started way back in 2020, most recently February 15th of 2024, and then obviously the Joint Planning heard this request at their March meeting. So with that being said, discretionary voluntary EAW, per our ordinance, County Board is the entity that has to authorize the EAW, and if it is authorized, the one that has been completed, the Joint Planning Board is looking for verification of authenticity to the information in it, which is why they recommended what they recommended to this body. The other option that you have is if this EAW can be sent to the EQB for dispersal and or put into the monitor for review, a 30-day review period. But the action starts with the board in regards to whether or not we feel as a county that an EAW is required or would help with the decision-making process.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
I just want to note that Commissioner Luthens has just left the table due to possible conflict of interest, so thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Nitter?
Let's go ahead.
Mark, can you explain option 2 a little deeper? Toward the end of your talk, you said we had a couple options.
So first,
can you kind of, bring option 2 back into my view?
Absolutely, thank you, Commissioner. So First and foremost, the need to, the first required action would be, do we feel that an EW is required or is necessary? I shouldn't say required, is necessary to help make this decision. The McLeod County Feedlot Committee recommended that an EW be done. The Hutchinson Area Joint Planning Board asked that that EW that was completed be reviewed for authenticity. So if the board says, yes, we need an EW and we would like that to be, the information to be verified, you can send that to a third-party consultant. There are consultants that do that review, that type of work, to determine if the information provided in the EW that the applicant has provided is thorough or if there's some gaps in that information. The second option you have is the EW that has been prepared could be sent to the EQB, Environmental Quality Board of the state. They have a dispersal list that they then give that information to other entities, and I can read that for you if you'd like to know who they are. And then once that's done, it goes into the EQB monitor for a 30-day review process, comment period.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It makes it a little bit clear on what our options might be.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
so, Mark, is also step one, just, I mean, at this point, the EAW that's been completed was on a voluntary basis because the board hadn't required it, correct?
So voluntary / discretionary, they're the same in the eyes of the state, Minnesota Rule 4410, and it's not mandatory. So the mandatory threshold for an EAW on a feedlot permit is if it's a new feedlot of 1,000 animal units or more, or if it is an existing feedlot of, and they're expanding by more than 1,000 animal units. So there's no mandatory threshold. So it's voluntary / discretionary, which was asked for by our committee, our review committee, which is our feedlot committee, to be done, and the applicant did submit that.
So does the board need to confirm if they are requiring or requesting an EAW in general first, and then step two, if the EAW that's already been completed, if that's sufficient, and then does it get to the two options of, you know, that you started? I'm just trying to make sure that we.
That is exactly the way I see it, yeah.
Okay.
Exactly the way you presented that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
I don't know, that hinges on my question. Who looked at the one that has been done and determined that it's not, lack of a better words, not good enough?
So we as staff have reviewed that. Myself, Dan Jokum with the city is here, Tom Dahl, he's the chairman of our joint planning committee. Kevin Lindeman is in the audience as well. He's the chairman of our feedlot committee. There are examples, and I can give you what they look for in regards to an EAW review, but I'm not a soil scientist as staff. I'll use myself as an example, so I can't determine permeability rates in regards to manure application and what that effect would be on groundwater. So that's typically what an environmental consultant would do. They have staff on hand to do that review.
So, but, I mean, how did we get here? I truly don't quite understand the whole thing. I mean, evidently, there's been a process followed up to this point, and now it's got to be a better one, lack of a better word again. EAW was made, but who, I mean, did all these committees look at it and we're not satisfied with the one that's provided? And I'm not one to judge. I mean, I could look at before and after, and I'm not going to be able to tell. That's why I'm wondering who's making these decisions.
It's a good question, and so just for complexity to try to speak through that, the EAW was recommended in 2020 when an application was made for this expansion, and the applicant withdrew that application and has since completed the EAW. The EAW then was submitted as part of the application packet when he submitted application in January. I'd have to look at the exact date, January of 2024 we'll say. And then that review went to the McLeod County Feedlot Committee, which stated that that EAW should be vetted because we as staff, the board members, had some, I don't want to say their concerns, they just wanted to know that the information provided was thorough. And so with that being said, the applicant, I had conversations with the applicant, and you as a county board are the entity by ordinance that has the authority to order whether or not that EAW is needed. So one was voluntary. Under the initial application that was made in 2020, it never came to the county board. The application was withdrawn after the feedlot committee. So with that requirement, that EAW then was done and submitted with this application. And after the feedlot committee, if we would not have taken that to the joint planning board, the request for that EAW would have come to the county board asking, should this or should this not be done? Do you feel that there's a need for this to be done based on location and size and scope and operation? And there's multiple factors that go into whether or not an EAW should be done. So I don't know if I answered your question
Well,
specifically.
you did kind of, Mark, thanks, but, and again, I'm gonna I'd like to hear from the different, what triggered it, because I'm having trouble with mandatory and voluntary. Once we make a decision, it's mandatory. Then it's no longer voluntary anymore.
That is correct. So if you're saying that yes, an EAW is needed to make the decision in regards to this particular conditional use permit expansion, then whether it's reviewed by a third party or not, if you're saying one is needed, which has been done, it has to go to the EQB for review.
Okay, yeah, because I'm thinking, I'm not taking it lightly, because it sets precedence as well. If we're gonna start, there could be something else coming, and we have to make sure that we're doing consistently whatever it is we're doing here, I'd like to hear, I'm just a little short on history on how it advanced. I don't have a problem with it, but we have to set a precedence of one kind or another.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Still trying to follow the timeline here. So the feedlot committee reviewed it and asked for the EAW to be reviewed by a third party or go to the comment period? Or both?
Reviewed by a third party.
All right. The joint planning board tabled it essentially asking the same thing, or?
Correct. They tabled the conditional use permit, which is the permit
Yep.
for the expansion, asking for more information to make that decision, which is the EAW.
So again, as it's, not that this can't evolve quickly, even as we sit here, but right now, some of the questions before us are, do we essentially order the EAW to be reviewed by a third party, and then if we require an EAW, correct?
Correct.
So we have to say if we require an EAW, we have to decide if we want it reviewed by a third party. But either way, if we do require it, it needs to go to the EQB.
Correct.
So if we require the EAW, it has to go to that, which is essentially a 30-day comment period.
That is correct. And if I may, Mr. Chair, there's one piece that I can talk to in regards to that process. So Minnesota Rule 4410.1200 EAW content. The EAW shall address at least the following major categories in the form provided on the worksheet. This is information that the applicant asked for me to look into in regards to content prior to today's meeting. So A, identification including project name, project proposer, and project location. B, procedural details including identification of the RGU, Regulatory Government Unit, EAW contact person, and instructions for interested persons wishing to submit comments. C, description of the project, the purpose of the project, methods of construction, quantification of physical characteristics and impacts, project site description, and land use and physical features of the surrounding area. D, resource protection measures that have been incorporated into the project design. E, major issues sections identifying potential environmental impacts and issues that may require further investigation before the project is commenced, including identification of cumulative potential effects. F, known governmental approvals, reviews, or financing required, applied for, or anticipated, and the status of any application made, including permit conditions that may have been ordered or are being considered. G, If the project will be carried out by a governmental unit, a brief explanation of the need for the project and an identification of those who will benefit from the project. And H, an assessment of the compatibility of the project with approved plan of local units of government. That's the content, how to rule. And then if, not if the county board authorizes the need for an EAW, it goes to the EQB and Minnesota Rule 4410.1500, publishing and distribution EAW. An RGU shall provide one copy of the EAW to the EQB staff within 5 days after the RGU approves the EAW. This copy shall serve as notification to the EQB staff to publish the notice of availability of the EAW in the EQB monitor. At the time of submission of the EAW to the EQB staff, the RGU shall also submit one copy of the EAW to, number 1, each member of the EQB, 2, the proposer of the project, 3, the U.S. Corps of Engineers, 4, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, 5, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, 6, the State Historical Society, 7, the State Archaeologist, 8, the Indian Affairs Council, number 9, the Environmental Conservation Library, number 10, Regional Development Commission and Regional Development Library for the region of this project site, number 11, any government unit within the project will take place, number 12, the representative of any petitioner pursuant to Minnesota Rule 4410, 13, any person upon written request. So that's the distribution list once it hits the EQB. I apologize for the length of that. Just wanted to make sure that I was thorough.
Mr. Chair, I'm still having trouble understanding the difference between mandatory and volunteer. I mean, evidently, whether it's clever or whether it isn't, the company is under the guidelines of having to do an EAW. Is that right? I mean, this is just added on to. I mean, I'm having trouble going from voluntary to mandatory.
So the mandatory piece is if the governing body feels that there are impacts due to the increase or the, the intensified use piece. If the board feels or the body feels, and in this particular case, it's your advisory boards, feeling that there's a need for more thorough information to make the decision, to give a recommendation.
Okay, and our boards have? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, our feedlot committee has, our joint planning board has, but you are the authority.
Mr. Chair, Mark, having a third-party review, what kind of timeline would be applicable as far as the completion of it from today until it's been vetted?
I can't answer that. I don't know. Speaking with various consultants, the review that's been done, they would have to look at that. The EAW that's been done, it would be a matter of them going through that EAW and comparing it to site conditions to determine, if there would be more information needed in regards to that. So to answer that question, I know typically when an EAW gets done, and I've only been through one other EAW as a staff member of the county. If the applicant works with the consultant and the consultant has adequate time to prepare that, typically they can be done fairly quick, 3 to 6 months, maybe longer. But again, I don't want to speak for them because it depends on what information they unearth and if there's more level of detail that's needed for a specific area.
Thank you, Mark. Mr. Chair, that's kind of what I was getting at. I was looking at, are we talking about 2 months or 2 years here? And it sounds like we're on the shorter time frame of the range I just mentioned.
If required, I would hope that to be the case, yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, obviously, we have a couple of bodies that I haven't personally heard from the city of Hutchinson, except through, the planning commission. And other than the information I've got in the packet, that's all I know about that. But what's the difference? I mean, again, it's another entity going through stuff. What's the difference between them and doing that and us maybe it's a Ryan question, and us actually having a hearing and having that public input on our own before we decide. And I'm not trying to get too far out in the weeds, just that does the EAW or whoever does this then claim any responsibility for making sure their work is right? I mean, it still comes back to us at the end of the day, right?
As far as the approval of the EAW, it does, because you are the RGU. Typically on a feedlot expansion, MPCA is the reviewer. Because they've already issued the operation permit for the expansion, they exempted themselves from doing that. So with that being said, it's a third party that looks at authenticity and then it sends it to the EQB. But yes, that information does come back to you to accept that information as accurate, or if there's still more concerns prior to making a decision on that conditional use permit.
So other than looking for the accuracy of the EAW that has been presented, there's no other real questions?
I have had no impacts submitted to me, concerns from the area. And again, I don't want to speak for the committees that are here today. I think, obviously, being that it's in the joint planning area, which is a 2-mile radius that surrounds the city of Hutchinson, it's 5,066 feet from the closest municipal boundary. I would assume, and I shouldn't do that, but I would assume as staff that probably has something to do with the discussion at both bodies.
So if any of the other committees want to make any comments, if their representatives are here, I'll just go through a few notes. So I've been on the committees that have seen it up to this point, and just to bring up a few points of filling in that timeline and some thoughts along the way. I've been a part of the feedlot story from about 1996 to 97 when the first ordinance meetings happened. And so I've been a part of the feedlot committee and all the proceedings ever since then. So to be clear, we need the livestock industry here in the state of Minnesota. It brings billions of dollars of income. I covered that at our last meeting when we talked about National Ag Week. Our conflict always happens when agricultural practices and the general public or a population interact and have conflict. And I think that's where we're hung up to a degree on this one, is where we have our county's largest city right next to our county's largest feedlot. And where does that conflict lie? Is there any at all? And I don't think that the feedlot committee or the joint planning board, and to agree some thoughts up here, who's ready to answer that question of where those challenges are and be called out if we're wrong. And so I think the thought process is we need some truth and documentation to be verified. That EAW, that the voluntary one, whether it gets sent to the EQB board or we work with one of the other consultant firms to do one, gives us an official document to lie on that has been vetted publicly through those channels, although there's probably an excess of them. I think we need an insurance policy, I think, is what those boards are asking for, is to be able to fall back and say it was vetted through this channel. There's nothing better that can be done. And then when that comes back, we can very confidently approve the CUP without having to have a reining effect of conditions on it and make it difficult. It makes it a lot easier to approve. I don't think we're an ag-friendly county. I don't think we're trying to get in the way of agricultural growth, but I think we need to be able to truthfully answer that question, is how do those two entities interact when they're so close to each other? And that is what we're trying to avoid. And when they don't interact well, to be quite honest, that's how rules are getting made, and as a farmer myself, we don't need any more rules. So this is one of those steps we can do to locally, as we're here for a zoning matter, locally make sure that doesn't happen.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
if they're willing, I'd like to hear from the entities affected. They're the committees and City of Hutch, kind of what their thought process is on it, if they're willing to come up.
If anybody wants a statement from anyone?
I would too, thanks.
Good Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Dan Jolkum, Planning Director, City of Hutchinson. Here as a staff member for the city, and then also sit on the Joint Planning Board as a staff member with Mark. From the city's perspective, I think it would be fair to say that we would like to see a review, just to kind of go and see what maybe the impacts are. I think the applicant's done a good job in working with Centrisota to put the EAW together. But in my experience, previously I was in consulting, and we did some of these EAWs. Typically, they're prepared by an environmental type scientist, and then get that vetted process, even if they are voluntary. So again, I think from the city's perspective, we just like to understand what the potential impacts might be, and then we might have more information to make a decision on, I shouldn't say a decision, but have an opinion on whether or not the expansion should occur or not occur. So, any questions related to that?
So Mr. Chair, I guess the only question I'd have, then you would like more information to review than what you have, is what you're
Yeah,
saying?
I think so. And again, the city's just one member of that joint planning board, and we have one of the 6 members. But I think from, again, the discussions I've had internally with some of our management team and such, is that we haven't had any negative impacts from the feedlot to this point. But we'd like to understand what potential there would be with it being larger. I think the other part of it is that, the feedlot has grown incrementally over time, and there's never been an EAW done. Theoretically, I think Mark said if it's over 1,000 units in the beginning, one needs to be done, or if the expansion's over 1,000 units, one needs to be done. But, the expansions have been under that, but now we're getting up over, 3,000 animal units total. So, again, the idea that the largest city is within a mile of this feedlot, I think planning in general is just to look out for the future. And it might be that there's no issues, and it might be we have to consider some mitigation efforts maybe to make sure that there isn't an impact to the feedlot or to the city or the township or whatnot. So, any other questions I can answer for you? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Anyone else? Mr. Lindeman's coming up.
Morning.
Morning.
Kevin Lindeman from the Feedlot Committee. We've been talking about this since 2020 already, and whether and I know the Luthans were very good about volunteering and doing the EEW program and getting it in front of us here. Part that disturbed me a little bit was MPCA issued the permit, and now they won't review the EAW for us. So, what are they, washing their hands of this, Mark, or exempting themselves, I guess. So that kind of is a little bit was a little bit hard for us to try and make a decision on that through the board. But location. I think that's probably the biggest thing. The townships. It's important that the township get involved, I think, and I think they maybe are a little bit with some concerns, roads, all this stuff. But like I said, I don't think we haven't had a lot of issues or any issues with the Luthans out there as far as following everything that they're doing. The review, maybe internally, I don't think we can do it again, but if we can find somebody that could do this and just give us an overview, I don't think we got to put it into any law or anything for the county. Just get a review, being it is a voluntary thing. So appreciate that they did this. I know there's a pretty large report, so, but any questions?
Okay,
Thank you.
yep, thanks, Kevin.
Tom Dahl, Hutchinson Area Joint Planning Committee Chairman. Just to remind you that the committees that you appoint and we sit on are here to do the boots on the ground. That's what we're here for. So I'm just going to give you a few examples because, Mr. Kruger, you said you didn't understand. When I get a document like this, and this is what it says, The information contained in this document is accurate and complete to the best of my knowledge. Unsigned, undated. Okay? So that was a red flag for me. And I tried to understand why is this not signed and dated? Who reviewed it? Who's the person with the credentials that can do this? And it wasn't done. And then somehow we're using this word voluntary. And to me, it's like, whether it's voluntary or not, it still needs to be certified so that I know that it's accurate and correct. I brought this up when Eric was at the meeting, and I showed him, and I'm going to show you. I have several items that are marked in this document, okay? Each page, and I'll just go to one page. 4 items on one page I got questions on. Another one, just 1. Another one, 3. Another one, 4. Another one, 8. I'm the committee that's supposed to be doing the boots on the ground, and I got so many questions on the document that aren't answered. To be fair, when Garrett was in front of us, I showed him this and explained this to him at the public meeting. I've not had any conversations with him as to the concerns that I flagged there. Mr. Jocham and Mr. Teleki have both talked to me about the concerns that I had flagged. So I'm going to give you an example. You said this is true and accurate to the best of their knowledge. Quantities of manure generated total, 19,188,674 gallons. Next statement. That was by species 1. Species 2, 191,881,674. I think we need to know the difference between 19 million and 191 million gallons. There's lots of stuff in the document that I think are inaccurate or mistyped or not fully understood how to answer. I see a lot of NA, not applicable. I'm going to give you an example. Doesn't interfere with any other expansion plans or anything. We got Mr. Jocham from the city invited us, Hutch Joint Planning, to their planning sessions at the city, and I'm fully aware of their 5-year plan. So I just think it needs to be reviewed and signed off by somebody that's accredited, or reviewed for 30 days by people that are experts. We are not. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Is there anyone else that wishes to approach the board? All right, discussion, gentlemen.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
I guess what I've gleaned here so far, Mr. Dahl, I just want to clarify, when I said I didn't understand, I can pick out all the pieces, but I want to make sure that we set precedents, if that's the right words, to all. I mean, I'm a little bit confused about the expansion so far. Why wasn't there something in there that, you expand 3 times and then it triggered? I mean, that's where the consistency for me comes in. I mean, I'm almost leaning now where you have to have something to rely on. I'm a little, again, inconsistency. I mean, that everybody's the same. We don't have to go through these processes once you hit this plateau. This has to be done, not voluntarily, not anything else. This has to be done to keep on going. So that's where I'm confused right now. I mean, I don't know how many expansions were made that if you'd have done it all at one time, it would have triggered it anyway. So I'm a little confused there.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I appreciate that. So that's a great point. That's a point that I have brought up to the state, to MPCA, because these rules apply whether you're a mile from a city boundary or you're 15 miles out and you don't have any neighbors or, rivers, ditches, creeks, streams, you name it. So my concern is that, right? So I think some of the comments that were made here, location, I don't know that that's apples to apples depending on where the expansion's occurring. So I appreciate that comment, because I have been here for one expansion in 2008, and was ex officio staff on the Joint Planning Board, and there were a number of people that attended that meeting. Not going to say there were concerns, but that's, I think, why we're here today is, at what point does one need to be done? And the state's only going to tell you what's mandatory, and that mandatory threshold is if you're a new feedlot permit that's 1,000 animal units or more, or if you're an existing feedlot permit and you're expanding by 1,000 animal units or more, then it's mandatory. If there are concerns in regards to potential environmental impacts, one could be requested, but it's not, that would be up to the RGU to do that. So from our perspective, there was never a mandatory requirement for doing one. So just for argument's sake, if you will, this potential site could have, you know, many years of expansion in front of them and never have to do an EAW unless it's asked for by the local government, the regulatory government unit, which is, in this case, you as a county board. Does that help?
Does it help me?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot, because, I mean, well, it helps me to where we have to draw a line somewhere, because otherwise we just put it off, because we're still gonna come back here and have to approve it or deny it.
Not that,
And, well, I mean, it's ultimately gonna turn into a permit, you know, and we have to review that information. So we're gonna be back to square one, but with more information. My words again, I'm stumbling over them a little, but that's what my thought process is.
that is correct. You're exactly right.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
One more time for me. If we require an EAW, whether we require it reviewed by a third party or not, it will go to the EQB.
That is correct.
So, Garrett, do you have anything you want to talk about at all? Or-
To make the main point of why we started with MPCA, we follow more regulations, and no disservice to Lucky's office. We have to go through many more permits with them. I explained that to the Joint Planning Board. So if we were not going to be able to get a permit, I'm going to start with the state. They regulate everything. Water, even our air emissions, we have to call that in when we start pumping. We have to let them know. To give you an example. So that is the reason. I believe Commissioner Courier said if this is some run-around game, no. It's 900 animal units, 700 cows. It's just what it is. If we melt those little brown things, it had only been 700 animal units. So, again, this is not to get around any rule. This is where I start with MPCA because we worked with them for quite a while. And I'm going to go to them first. And it's been pretty clear that they can require an EAW too for just the permit if there's a petition. So we've advertised this quite a bit. And I'm not dismissing a public concern. I believe what Commissioner Wright brought up, but there's not been anything people showing up for. So I do appreciate it, but just so we set the record straight, I started with the state of Minnesota on purpose because they're going to give me the guidelines on what I can and can't do there. That has come to you guys to see if I can get the condition, the permit to it. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
We've, to Mr. Dahl's point, we do rely on these committees to, steal your words, to get the boots on the ground and go through this. Sure, there's been times that we've deviated from their recommendations, but we've had reasons why to do that. And I guess I don't see that we have that today. So I'm gonna move, we'll see where it goes. I'm gonna move that an EAW be required with a third-party review. That's my motion.
Mark, is that motion clear enough in the expectations?
Yes, thank you.
Is there a second? Is there a second? I'll second the motion to get into discussion.
I was just about to, I need discussion. Is there any way a guy can expedite that? I mean, can we look at these people that review this and make sure they don't drag it out for a long period of time?
So as staff, I would work with the applicant, and my review is, I've got 5 consultants, just to name a few: ISG out of Mankato, Whitseth out of Mankato, Bar Engineering out of Minneapolis, WSB out of Minneapolis, EOR out of St. Paul. I would work with the applicant on choosing a third party for review. And then we would send that to that third party for review to give clear expectations in regards to what's being asked. So in regards to a timeline, I as staff would agree, based on the tabling of the conditional use permit to June for joint planning, that we do everything in our power to try to meet that timeline.
Mr. Chair. Where I'm at with this is, I want to make sure we're taking the proper steps. I want to make sure we have a transparent process in place. I regret that, we have to do a little extra, or a lot extra, I guess, if you want to characterize it, with the independent review. But I think we need to do that for the protection of the county, the board that I represent, and also for the protection of the family involved. And so that's where I'm at, and that's why I think we have to play it out to make sure that we have the data, we have the input, so that when it does come before us again, we have the comfort, to act on the request. So I'll be supportive of the motion based on that.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So again, tell me the process when this goes, if in fact we do require this EAW, does it come back to you and these committees? Because that holds a lot of faith for me. I'd like to make sure our committees are able and educating themselves on the process. So it goes back to them and then comes back to us. If it doesn't just come back to us and we bypass everything that we've done so far, does it?
What I'd like to do, if it pleases the board, is once that information comes back, we will forward that back to the Joint Planning Board for a recommendation. We will also forward that information to the Feedlot Committee, but I would also forward that to the county board, and we could do that via workshop prior to the recommendation coming from those bodies.
Well, I think that's a good idea. I mean, if we're gonna take that route. But, and another thing, I didn't mean, I'm not vested in this other than a county commissioner and like to see the dairy. I mean, it's obviously important to agriculture and to our county. It's unfortunate where everything lies as location. However, my comment earlier was, I didn't mean it clever in a bad way. I mean clever in the rules that were made. I was having a problem because the dairy was following all the rules, but that maybe the right word was a loophole. I mean, it was kind of a loophole that I think we should take under consideration. Excuse me, that doesn't happen again. That we don't have to go. I'd have done the same thing. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I'd have done the same thing. But
Mr. Chair, if I may, just to comment on that, I appreciate that as well. So I don't think anybody's here saying that there's been anything egregiously done wrong and that there are any concerns. The matter of the fact is to help make this decision moving forward with the intensification of the use. That's what we're asking for the review as a body, Joint Planning Board, Feedlot Committee, and I'm speaking on behalf of them now. That's why that is being asked for, because they just want to be assured before they send a recommendation to you that they've thoroughly vetted that with information that they feel comfortable with.
because for the most part of the people that I've talked to since being a commissioner, or maybe even a little before, any issues with the dairy, I'm a farm boy, so I mean, it smells like money to me, it doesn't smell bad, so, but at any rate, what I do know about the dairy, any issues that came up, they have seemed to address them, and I've had some follow-up, whether it was by, land to end some conflicts, whatever the thing was, I heard for the most part, nothing but good that way, so I don't want to confuse it, cloud up that issue, but.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. We do have a motion. Yep.
Just a minute, Darrell.
Oh. Yeah. Do we have a portable mic?
Can you get him a mic?
Thank you. I have a little problem trying to understand what we're doing here. MPCA is 22 pages, and we have a signed agreement with the MPCA, the state of Minnesota. So I don't know what the EAW is going to do extra. I read that thing 3 times. I think we're asking for something not needed. And secondly, it wasn't done in a timely manner. The order of things being done, it was asked to do an EAW, but nobody in the county can address it, analyze it, and they didn't say that. So did we say that 2 years ago with the EAW to have a third party?
At that time, going back, I'd have to look at the feedlot minutes. I don't believe we did, no. And I think part of the problem with that is it was assumed that it would be done by a third party, not by the entity, not by the applicant.
There's 22 pages from the MPCA, and I think they're pretty thorough, like Garrett said before. And he did the paperwork. The county was not ready for it. So I don't know where the burden lies. I think the county's out of step. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further comments, discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay,
Thank
thank you. We'll be working with the applicant then.
Yes, thank
all
you.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll be moving on to our next item of business. Darrell, did you want to come back up, or did you want to just stay down there? Barry, do you want to just wait a second till we get?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Barrett. Go ahead.
Yep, good morning.
Good morning.
One item before you today, consider approving the fiscal host agreement between McLeod County Health and Human Services and Southwestern Minnesota Adult Mental Health Consortium, sometimes referred to as the Southwest 18, for the period of April 2nd, 2024 through April 2nd, 2025. McLeod County Health and Human Services will serve as the fiscal host and manage all funds of the Southwest 18 Consortium and will be reimbursed 3% of all annual revenues on a quarterly basis. The fiscal host will also be considered a voting member of the consortium's operational board. So as you'll recall, I brought this to a couple different workshops for updates and information. We are at a good place where our county attorney's office has reviewed, the attorney at Southwest 18 has reviewed and agreed on the agreement together. Also, in working with Assistant Accounting Attorney Steve Ott, he did review the current joint powers agreement and did say that we do not need all the other counties to sign as we have in the past, that the it is a joint powers agreement, and so the Southwest 18 chair can sign on behalf of that board. So we don't have to go through all of that to sign. So if we approve, the county board would, Chair Wright would sign today, then I would bring it to the joint powers board of the Southwest 18 next Friday for them to approve. I see no issues in moving forward with that, and we would only need one signature on that day, and we would be ready to go.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Excuse me. You were talking, did we get two out of this, or we just get the one?
So as a fiscal host, we will for sure have a vote. Then our county commissioner, who Commissioner Luthens is there now, he will also get a vote.
So we will have that
Yep.
theoretically two.
Yep. Yep.
And the second question I had is, having the fiscal host, we have all the money here in McLeod County. Now, will we be able to, we'll get 3% of just all the handling of the money, or?
All of the total grants that the Southwest 18 gets, we will get 3% of that.
Okay. And maybe getting a little far out there, but it makes a difference now. Any money that's in the bank and generates interest, or if we manage that right, does that go back into the consortium? Or
The interest goes back to the consortium.
Okay.
Yes.
Just want to be clear on that, and then I'd ask for, as you move along, being we had some trouble in other joint powers, the insurance, or MCIT,
Yep.
I don't think you maybe have the answer for that today, but we are covered, right? I mean, they have issues covering joint powers. I found that out in other entities, that you have to
Okay.
do a special insurance, and maybe your entity has that insurance, I don't know, but I would just check into it to see
Sure.
if there's a lawsuit of any kind or fraud that we are covered.
And Assistant County Attorney Ott did review for the indemnification and
Okay.
all of that stuff, and fully covered. The Joint Powers Board did actually recommend that we add some information in there. And Steve wasn't comfortable with that because he felt that it kind of canceled out the indemnification of the consortium. So we didn't put that in there.
Okay.
And they were okay. They maybe weren't pleased, but they were okay moving forward with that. So we are not held responsible for anything if something happens to the consortium and those dollars.
Okay. Again, I'm just speaking from experience from a different, only a two-entity joint powers where they had an issue of insurance was from that entity. So I just asked that you just double-check that as time goes on.
Sure. This contract or agreement also does auto-renew, but I just put that we would approve for 1 year, and then we could come back and discuss. And if you feel everything is going okay, we don't have to do anything, it just auto-renews. But if we want to get it out at any time, we certainly can at that point as well.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Barrett, what is the revenue? I never heard of the number.
Oh, gosh, I had it here. Let me see if I can find it quick. My apologies.
Hope you got enough coming in to cover all that.
We do, yeah, we have,
Pretty detailed.
yep.
Well, again, I think you're covering, we don't have to go, by being fiscal host, if it's anything like anything else, we don't go into our funds to make their
No.
checks good. So
No.
and there's quite a lot of money that changes hands through grants that goes into an account and goes out. And if we get 3% of that, and then we were talking about some help before we've went through this pretty good, I think it's all right, unfortunately.
Yeah, I apologize. I don't have that number on hand, but I do know that it was enough to, as you recall, we brought an accounting tech up to full-time. So to cover that, plus our fiscal officer, Emily's salary to do that, plus additional extra. So it does cover the cost of us performing the tasks plus.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
I'll move request as presented.
Okay, we do have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
We We have a motion by Schmalz, a second by Luthens to consider approving the fiscal host agreement between McLeod County Health and Human Services and the Southwestern Minnesota Adult Health Consortium. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just want to mention that this week is National Public Health Week as well. So if you know someone in public health or have a family member in public health, reach out and tell them thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Public Works, Andrew.
Good morning.
Morning.
Item A, please consider approving a quote for a new Trimble R12i GPS and TSC7 controller from Frontier Precision for a cost of $45,660.51 plus applicable taxes and shipping with funds from the highway construction budget. Public Works engineering staff utilizes its current GPS daily on construction sites for topographic surveys and construction documentation. Right now, staff, we are utilizing one unit, and when we have multiple projects going on or multiple people on the project, we're spending a lot of time and resources shuttling that unit back and forth for different staking and documentation needs. We priced out trading in our current R10 GPS unit. That only has about a $2,200 value to it on trade-in. All the value is in the software, which you do not get back on trade-in. And so for us, it was a much better value for us to add an additional unit rather than replace the current unit. The new R12i units have better antennas and allow us better coverage in treed areas and next to buildings. And they also have a tilt compensation on them where you don't have to have perfectly level rod, and you can have a tilt and it'll adjust for that, which makes the surveying process, especially out in traffic when you're surveying, doing topographic surveys on open roads, much quicker and safer. This unit is in the 2024 capital engineering budget.
Okay, thank you. Any questions at all?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
will these two units talk to each other, or are they different software?
They will talk to each other. We can actually, with the addition of another unit, we can set the R10 unit to a base station instead of using RTK, so that we can get even better coverage in treat areas.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve the request.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion by Nagel, a second by Kruger to consider approval, for the purchase of the new Trimble equipment at a cost of $45,660.51. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Item D, consider approving a contract with Hutchinson, Minnesota to correct a portion of the road at Piepenburg Regional Park at a cost not to exceed $4,500 with funds from the Coronavirus Relief Fund. The downhill portion of the Piepenburg Regional Park Road leading to the campground experiences washouts on the inner portion of the curve every time it rains. As discussed at the last workshop, reshaping of this road is proposed to prevent this from occurring. Estimates were received from Lukey Contracting for $4,500 and Jerpy Contracting for $11,875. There is a spread in these. They are slightly different estimates. Lukey had less gravel in there in his estimate, but a little more shaping done without adding gravel.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
It kind of goes without saying, but you emphasized in when the bids went out that we have that washing problem, and that has to be, I mean, I would hold them somewhat accountable to make sure that, I mean, whether we're rationalizing or not, that's part of their issue of doing this, so I just make sure you stay on them when they do the work.
Yep.
But with that, I'd make a motion to approve.
And I'll second it.
We have a motion by Kruger and a second by Schmalz to consider approving an estimate from Lutke Contracting for $4,500. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
And Andrew, will you be acting as project manager to make sure that or at least someone in your department to make sure that we're getting the product that we had hoped to get as far as shaping, quantity of Class 5, looking for the management of the project.
Yep, we will be managing it internally within the department.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Item E, consider approving a quote from Innovative Foam of Hutchinson, Minnesota to purchase replacement entrance signs for all 6 McLeod County parks at a cost of $33,246 with funds from the Coronavirus Relief Fund. An estimate was received from Innovative Foam for $5,541 each for 6 8-foot by 8.5-foot durable foam signs at a total cost of $33,246. Installation would be completed by staff with assistance from Innovative Foam. As outlined in the Parks Plan, updated park signage has been identified as an implementation priority as well as one of the first focus areas. The signage was discussed at the County Board Workshop on March 19th.
Okay, questions, anyone? I'll make a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Wright, second by Nagel to approve the quote from Innovative Foam at a cost of $33,246. Excuse me, $33,246 for the McLeod County Park signage. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Item F, consider approving Public Works staff to purchase materials necessary to install the new signs at McLeod County Parks for a cost not to exceed $6,754 with funds from the Coronavirus Relief Fund. This would be the post and the concrete to put the signs on the ground.
Move to approve.
We have a motion. Is there a second? A second. We have a motion by Nagel, a second by Kruger to consider approving the purchase of the materials necessary for signs at a not to exceed $6,700 and, $67.54. Any further discussion?
Andrew, is there gonna be any thought of solar lights, or there's no electricity out to the signs, or do we think vandalism is foolish, or what do you think?
We're looking into it at this point. We have thought about vandalism. A couple of the parks have a street light out at the entrance. Others don't. So we're putting that all together with the landscaping portion that will be done with the existing parks budget.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up will be our calendar. Commissioner Nagel?
Yes, after last board meeting, our workshop, Andrew referenced that we focused on reviewing our parks plan, which I think was excellently presented, and we went through trying to identify the priorities, which I think we saw some today. We'll see more with the meetings to come, correct? All right. The other meeting that I'll bring in is I served in my alternate role at the Trailblazer meeting. Daryl, I'm glad you're back. I attended that. It was a great meeting, chaired by our own Doug Kruger. It just was enlightening again. I served on that board for whatever it was, 8 years, and going back, just kind of some of the same issues that are always there. Driver shortages, really focused on kind of the infrastructure, meaning the buses and what we need to serve the public, and go through there, determine the cost share throughout that meeting. But just there's a lot going on there, and if anybody ever has questions about that, please let us know, because it is a complex organization. I'll let Doug dive into it more if he chooses, but that'll be enough for me today.
Okay. Since our last workshop, joint planning meeting met, I think our main topic was here this morning. Last week, we had a joint ditch meeting between all of the bordering counties here with their commissioners and ditch inspectors as we talked over different policies and ditch projects. Also part of a committee extension meeting as well last week. just to select some of our outstanding citizens for some awards. And we'll let her go with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But since the last meeting, it hasn't been covered. Not Joe covered most of what's at Trailblazer. I mean, we have a number of issues there with, well, mainly with the high costs of equipment and buses, and we're behind in buses, and we are getting a couple new ones now. Supposedly, we had to rework the contracts, which I'm not too happy about, but again, like Commissioner Nagel said, it's an ongoing thing, and we can do the best we can do with what the state gives us the money for. As far as shares, we're doing real good managing the actual pocket costs from our counties. On the 25th, I had a Mid-Minnesota Development Committee annual transportation meeting on District 8. We reviewed, I believe, would be 25 our future plans for housing or for highway improvements, such as some of the 15 roundabout. Locally, it would be the bridge by Plato on 212, a number of items like that. We did not review this year's construction work. Did talk a little bit about roundabouts at Morningside, but that wasn't in this meeting. We Commissioner Wright and myself went to and Andrew went to or they invited me along to the Penn Township Board. We did talk a little transportation funding and some drainage issues there. It was a good meeting. A number of people attended. On the 29th, I had agenda review plus the joint ditch annual meeting that Commissioner Wright talked about. On Monday, I had yesterday I had MRC board meeting. Again, reviewing our priorities in the legislature, and personally, there's some things moving along, but I'm basically holding my breath for what the omnibus bills are going to have in them. I'm kind of scared that a lot of our planning for not, but that's my pessimistic view. So with that, I guess that brings me to, I skipped HRA. I had HRA on Wednesday, I believe it was the 27th. We discussed there about housing, the need for adequate or lower income housing, and obviously the costs and the monies available for that, and probably more to come. Liz was Danielson, our economic development supervisor. She was also there, and I'm glad she's there. We're comparing. We've got a lot of the same grants to look at, and I believe it's an important thing. We have some insurance money, and we got some money from the fund for what's the right word? I'm missing it. Our COVID relief money that we have used. That we had some left over from the furnaces in the air to with that and the insurance money on the roofs to re-roof a number of our homes. So that gives us quite a boost. So we don't have to raise the rent. I guess with that, I'm done. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Kruger, and thank you for covering my UCAP Joint
I
Powers
forgot
Board
that.
meeting for me on Thursday, the 21st as well. It was a Zoom meeting, and I appreciate your help with covering that meeting for me.
And Commissioner, I apologize for skipping it on here. It's on my other page, but it was a good meeting. I mean, there's some questions that I had, and they were with the number of people that we're handling, and I had some questions that they were very gracious to answer, and went past them, and I think they're doing all right.
All right, thank you. So And then on Friday, the 22nd, I actually had a Zoom meeting with the director of UCAP. We're looking at a Head Start program here in McLeod County and the feasibility of having a program. So we're working on it. It's in its infant stages. There's a discussion taking place. Last week on the 26th, Tuesday, I had a CHB, Community Health Board, Executive Board Zoom meeting. And following that meeting, I had a Wellbeing Committee Zoom meeting that afternoon. And like the other commissioners mentioned, on Friday the 29th, we had a joint drainage annual meeting right here at the McLeod County Government Center. And as Commissioner Kruger referenced, yesterday I attended the MRC legislative update by Zoom. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I was on medical leave. I have nothing.
Sure, thank you. Attorney's office.
My office has been busy, particularly lately with our criminal caseload duties. In this last month, for instance, we've had a couple of multi-day jury trials, one of first-degree drugs and felon in possession of a firearm. That was a 3-day trial. Defendant was found guilty. He'll be looking at between 80 and 100 months for a presumptive sentence. And then this past week, another multi-day felony jury trial. That was a criminal sexual conduct in the first degree. The defendant was found guilty along with electronic solicitation of a child, and he'll be facing somewhere between a 180 and a 200-month range. So just an example of some of the work we've been doing recently, and we are hoping to have an individual come before the board here at the next meeting perhaps to join our office. So we have extended an offer, and I believe we'll have something to present to the board at the next meeting. So looking forward to that, getting back to full strength. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, go ahead. Yep.
Do these people stay in McLeod County in jail? Or you?
So both of these individuals are currently housed in our county jail awaiting sentencing. Once they're sentenced, assuming they're committed to the Commissioner of Corrections to prison, which is what the sentencing guidelines suggest here, then our sheriff's office would transfer them up to St. Cloud, to the correctional facility there. From there, they would get assessed as far as which facility they'd be staying in, and they could get transferred to other facilities in the state. So once they're sentenced, if that sentence is prison, then they go to a state facility. But currently, both are housed locally right now.
Thank you.
Thanks. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I attended the county township meetings with some of the commissioners. Thank you for bringing staff along. It is beneficial, and I think that we had a good show up, and we got to see a lot of the county citizens on that night. So that's all I have for that. Item A, notification of board workshop following the board meeting on Tuesday, April 16, 2024 at the McLeod County Government Center here at 520 Chandler Avenue North, Glencoe, Minnesota. And then item B, we do not have a county board workshop today. It's canceled due to no topics of discussion. Thank you.
Okay, we've reached the end of our agenda this morning. But there is room for any open forum or press relation questions. Any questions before the board? Okay,
Mr. Chair,
go ahead.
I do have one thing I missed as well here. Today, there's an open house, a Minnesota DOT open house at the Glencoe City Center from 4 to 6. It's on the roundabout project 212 in Morningside, so I would encourage anyone that has questions about Morningside to look at them now. So far they're not digging, but it's in perception, it's kind of nice if you ask questions before the project is really going. So again, I would encourage, it's going to cover the detour ideas and any other questions that may come up. So again, I would encourage anybody interested to go, and it covers a lot of people in Glencoe and around the area. So thank you.
Thanks for that update. Anything else? We'll be looking for a motion to recess.
Move recess, Mr. Chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Schmalz, a second by Luthens, to recess until our next county board meeting, which is 9 a.m. Tuesday, April 16th at the McLeod County Government Center. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you.
I got a few minutes there.